Okie dokie. Well, we're back. I'm gonna try to beat this game before the new year. Welcome back to the Ever 17 playthrough for the Out of Infinity. We're gonna do Koko's Run continuing that from what we did last time. I can talk. And then I just wanna do a little recap because things are kinda getting crazy. We're playing both as Takeshi and this new character, Hokuto. And here's a recap from what was happening before. So we have, we started out with Takeshi's timeline, and we learned that she just starts talking about herself and her other self, and she's talking about holding sin, and it sounds like she's going crazy. Then we zip back to Hokuto's timeline, where you short circuits after we explain that Sarah and Hokuto are fraternal twins, which means they are very different than being identical. I think at one point she started saying cow now, cow, I don't know why. Then we come across like a spooky ghost singing the same lullaby that Sarah used to sing. So then we zip back to Takeshi's timeline, where we're talking to Koko, who's singing the same lullaby. It made us play this game of Crawly Caterpillar, where we embarrass ourselves again. And we explained that the lullaby is called the Moon and Ocean Lullaby, which is surprisingly the same thing, the same characters that are in Tsugumi's name. And she tells us that her mommy's actually Tsugumi. Whoa! And then we zip back to Hokuto's timeline, where Koko is a ghost, clearly talking to us, telling us to revert back to our true selves, who is clearly aware of both timelines. Don't know what she's talking about. Anyway, we zip back to Takeshi's timeline, and we spend a late night playing with Koko, and she spends it mostly laughing maniacally while punching dolphins and telling dirty jokes. And then we zip back to Hokuto's timeline, where we lifted Tsugumi's skirt to see her leg scar from the other timeline. And then back to Takeshi's timeline, where we see a leg scar in the jellyfish gondola, and Tsugumi and he clearly bone down. And then she takes a picture of Takeshi in post-coital bliss and engraves it in the hologram of the pendant that Sarah has been holding. Anyway, lots of stuff has happened. I wonder where this could go next. Let's find out, shall we? Okay. This time I saved, because I am a good gamer. Come on. Nope. I can't even click this. Load. Okay, so we're back in Hokuto's timeline, looking at the pendant. Oopsies. Alright. The hologram pendant. I thought back to the image in Sarah's hologram pendant. That means the image in the pendant was a very different Kuronari Takeshi, and Tsugumi has infrared vision like Sarah and me, which means our parents are... Tsugumi says, "What is it?"
Are you alright, kid-san? You don't look so good.
I shook my head and shivered as I stepped slowly backwards. My back bumped up against the wall. It can't be. Huh? No. I let out a cry that was almost a scream. Swinging around, I opened the door and ran out of the control room. I wanted to get away as far as I could. I wanted to find a place where no one could find me, and I pounded up the emergency stairs. I ran forward in a dark haze, and I ran as far as I could escape from the fear that threatened to overwhelm me, farther and farther away. But in that confined space, there was nowhere I could run away to. Eventually, I reached to the end of the corridor, and ended up in front of the jellyfish gondola. There was no way past the closed watertight doors. I stood in front of a decorated arch. The gondola had been somewhere beyond the gates, which were veiled in darkness. In the gondola, Tsugumi and the real Kuronari Takeshi. It's impossible. I tried to purge the thought from my mind. I guess you don't want to be thinking about your parents boning down, but it's okay. But the suspicion mercilessly attacked my brain until I could no longer think straight. The battle between denial and acceptance. I writhed in pain, sinking farther into a trench of despair. And in my mind, there was only one possibility. I was almost convinced of the certainty of it. On the other hand, I hated the possibility so much that I wanted with all of my heart to reject it. I put my hand on my chest, breathing in deeply, and tried to calm my thoughts. If it were true that Tsugumi had infrared vision, and if the incident I witnessed in the jellyfish gondola really did happen, the Kurenari Takeshi and Komachi Tsugumi, who had existed in the other world, would be our parents. No, it can't be! I was once again overwhelmed by feelings of denial. Sarah and I were 16. If Tsugumi had given birth to us, it would have been 16 years ago. Huh? I suddenly felt as if I had been hit by lightning. My head was filled with a blinding light, and suddenly kicking off the floor, I broke into a run. It was 2017, so 16 years prior would have been 2001. The world I had seen was 2000. Wait a minute. What if the year wasn't 2017? I opened the door in the security office and stumbled into the room. As I suspected, I found you there. You! Breathing heavily, I approached you. What is it? What is it? What's wrong? This year. What year is it? Huh? Just answer me. I blinked slowly, her mouth half you blinked slowly, her mouth half open. Well? I glared at you and pressed her for an answer. A little overwhelmed by my enthusiasm, you seemed a bit disconcerted. On the standard calendar, 2034. Why? So I guess I blacked out. So, okay, we zip over to Takeshi's timeline. It's 2017. So 2013 was 4 years ago? I said to you. You and I were alone in the security office. You had suddenly asked me to come and see her and started talking about what had happened in 2013. No, I probably had seen it coming. Just before she had spoken to me, you had hinted indirectly that she had changed her mind and needed someone to confide in. Her expression was solemn, like a nun about to seek redemption. Yu's eyes were empty of emotion, and at the same time her gaze showed an unconditional compassion, impartial, demanding of nothing and asking nothing. And after a short while, that's right, it was 4 years ago, when I was 14. Yu began quietly to tell her story. Yubise Harukana had a serious heart condition. She hadn't been born with it. Maybe it's Maybelline. Sorry. In 2013, she was 14. She had suddenly fallen ill. One day, Yu had suddenly collapsed. She was examined at the hospital, and the doctor told her, "This is very hard for me to tell you, so I want you to listen very calmly. You have very serious heart condition." This is my doctor voice. It's unclear whether you'll make it to the end of high school. That meant she only had 3 or 4 more years to live. A transplant was out of the question, and even with treatment, she would only suffer and couldn't guarantee that she would get a cure. There was no way left for her to survive, and she had received a death sentence. But medical treatment is advancing daily. In a few years, we may still find a cure. So don't give up. You have to fight this illness. Thank you, doctor. With the doctor's hollow consolation, emptiness took over her mind. 2014. Her fear of her approaching death was growing. One day, while she was at the hospital, she met a gentleman, and through the course of their meetings, she and the gentleman came to trust one another and became very close. It was a close relationship, like the bond between a parent and a child, between a father and a daughter. Yubise Harukana had grown up without knowing a father's warmth. Perhaps she was seeking from him the love from the father that she had never known. As for the gentleman, he had a daughter close to her age. And when he found out about Yu's illness, he felt as much sympathy as he would for his own daughter. They were close, like a parent and a child, joined by a strong feeling like love. Having built up trust, Yubisei Harukana one day confessed her fear, her despair, and her agony to him. With a serious look on his face, the gentleman said, "Come to my lab." His name was Morino Shigezo. Dr. Morino was a world authority in genetic engineering. In November of that year, after making up her mind, Yubisei Harukana visited the doctor's lab. There were 3 types of immortality. Oh no. The first is immortality of the body. The second is immortality of the memory. And the third is the immortality of the gene. How would you like to try the third kind? The doctor presented that extraordinary plan to her with the calmness of a scientist, his tone matter of fact. Your heart problem was acquired after birth rather than being something that you were born with. So if you choose the third option, you don't have to worry about passing the condition on to your children. There is nothing for you to worry about. Ever since being told that she would die, she had been terrified at the approaching shadow of death. Not a night would go by that she didn't rail against her misfortune, all the while clawing at her chest in agony. She had given up on life, and there was no more than an empty shell. But that day, she was suddenly able to see a glimmer of hope. The doctor's words convinced her, and her way of thinking gradually changed. If I had a few more years to live, I at least would want to leave something of myself behind in this world. Her tenacity for life defied imagination, and she finally made the decision. She chose the third option. 1 month later, December of 2014, Yubisei Harukana had the nucleus of which her own cells implanted into her own ovaries and which began to grow in her womb. Of course, Dr. Marino performed the surgery. She was pregnant with her new self. 9 months later, September 22nd, 2015, Yubisei Harukana safely gave birth. Oh, we see a baby. And her name is Yu, but it's spelled Y-O-U instead of Y-U. Okay. Anyway. My baby! You are my sister. This is fucked. You are me, myself. Yubisei Harukana loved the new child with all of her heart and gave her a new name. She called her Yubisei Akikana. Okay. Yes, Yubisei Akikana was Yubisei Harukana's daughter. And at the same time, they were not only mother and daughter but also shared the same genetic design, just like twins. What a twist of fate. Did she do it out of the madness that came from being so close to death? But still, look at the lively face of the newborn child. Look at how pure its smile is, how bright its new life shines. Could anyone watch something as simple as its earnest attempts to grab something and believe that the baby was a tragedy? I don't know why. Was it a sin to create a life? Was it a sin to want life? The baby smiled happily. Sometimes it cried, as if it were asking, "Is it a sin to be alive?" I don't think the baby is crying because of that. I'm pretty sure the baby is crying because she needs a change of her nappies. But, okay. Okay. Monday, May 1st, 2017. Yubisei Harukana had become a student at the Kyumekan Women's College and started working part-time at Leimu during the holidays. Wow, that's not a lot of days, but okay. She wanted to find a clue about her father Yoichi, who had gone missing 17 years ago. Her mother, Yukie, kept telling her, "Your father fell into the ocean and drowned, but you didn't believe it." She held on to the hope that he was still alive somewhere. She had left her 1-year-old daughter, Yubisei Akikana, with her mother, so she was not worried about her. Yubisei Harukana's heart almost had reached its limit. She had given birth safely, but could no longer escape the fate which awaited her. There was only one thing left that she wanted to do. Before she died, she wanted to find out whether her father was still alive. The father who had disappeared when she was a year old. She had looked at his photo until it had become ragged and torn, but had no memories of his warmth or ever having been held by him. And for that reason, she wanted to say, she waved off all of the doctor's attempts to stop her and came to Lemu. She wanted to find out more about her father. What happened 17 years ago? She wanted to reveal the truth. And as her story ended, Yu reached for a file that was on the control panel, and she opened it silently and passed it to me. So the baby was your child? Which means you were lying to me.
It wasn't a lie. She is my daughter. But she's also my twin sister. And she's another me. She is myself.
I didn't know what to say.
This was my sin. I know I'll never be forgiven and will never be able to atone for it, but like I told you, I have no regrets. I'm glad I have her. I'll never forget the moment that new life was created. It was such an unbelievably happy moment. The first time that she said, "Mama, Mama," I can't explain it. It was more than a precious feeling or love or that good fortune that had come my way. I felt like I was wrapped in light. I don't care if I burn in hell. I don't care if I burn in the fires of hell for thousands or millions of years. But I knew I wanted to protect my daughter no matter what. I didn't want her to suffer. Her smile is so beautiful. Her tiny hands are so cute. She's everything to me. She's irreplaceable. Besides, none of this is her fault. She was welcome to this world just like another life born here, and at the same time, the moment I gave birth to her, I died. It was as if I no longer existed. You see, I gave all my life, my existence, to my child. You showed the photograph again. The baby in the picture was reaching out, trying to grab something. Oh, we zip. Back to Hokuto's timeline at 9:29 a.m. Hey, hello? Are you listening to me?
You grabbed my shoulders and shook me.
What's the matter with you, kid? You can't possibly have forgotten what year it is, can you?
Her words made no impression on me. What on earth? My mouth was dry and the palm of my clenched fist was drenched in sweat. First of all, I began to think things through. The you that I knew, the you standing in front of me, Yubise Akikana, was born on the 22nd of September 2015. Her mother was Yubise Harukana. That meant it was 2034, 17 years after Yubise Harukana's time in 2017. No, but wait, what about the date on that mail? It had been received on, I guess this is February 7th, 2019. My voice came out strangled. It's 2034 now. Yukie-san died 15 years ago, which would have been in 2019, but the date on that says 2019.
Oh, that? You're worried about that?
You laughed.
Well, I can understand why you might make that mistake. Do you see? The date on that mail was written in the German style.
Oh, I see.
Not in the Japanese order of year, month, day, but month, day, year.
Oh, wait. I don't know. Okay. So you're telling me that wasn't July 19th, 2002. It was February 7th, 2019? I said that. I'm sorry. I must have skipped a beat. I forgot that that's how the Japanese write the dates. Anyway, I was right the first time. I'm a puzzle smith. You nodded.
Any other questions?
I shook my head weakly and trudged out of the security office. I had figured out the relationship between you and her mother, but wondered whether I should tell her. No, I had to tell her. That was better for you in the long run. But first, I had to take care of my own problems. There was somewhere I had to go. It's 9:41 a.m. Sarah says,
"What is it?
Why did you bring me here for?" "I wanted to talk to you guys alone."
"About what?"
Tsugumi is there and she's not saying anything. Tsugumi was silent. She seemed to be afraid of something. Tsugumi perhaps already sensed what I was going to say. Her eyes flew around wildly.
"Is it important?"
"Yes, very. It's something that I don't want the others to hear. Wait, I don't mind if they hear it, but I wanted you and Tsugumi to know first."
so that's why I asked you to come over here. So what's so important? Hadn't Sarah noticed anything? Her blank, unguarded expression. She had to have noticed something. On May 1st, after Sarah met Tsugumi for the first time, she had looked totally dazed. Surely Sarah had sensed something. To be standing there calmly, she had to be in denial. Reason was telling her that what she expected couldn't be true. The coincidence of meeting her mother again was probably too much for Sarah to believe. Well, are you gonna say anything? Could you hurry it up? Sarah urged me to get to the point. Tsugumi said nothing, but her breathing seemed a little rough. Sarah, could you lend me your pendant and lighter for a moment? All right. She took them out of her pocket and gave them to me. Shick. I struck a flame, illuminating the pendant. Takeshi. That was the real Kuronari Takeshi. I held the pendant and the flame closer to Tsugumi. Tsugumi kept the head down, refusing to look up at the pendant. Her brow was furrowed and she was biting her lip, her arms pressed tightly to her sides. Sorry, I've got the hiccups, I guess. Her clenched fists were shaking. Look closer, I whispered to her. Have you seen this pendant before? You have, haven't you? It's Takeshi. The real Kuronari Takeshi is right here. The moment I said those words, Tsugumi's eyes flew open. Stripped of expression, she wore a face like a mask, only her eyes burned with a fierce light. Wait a minute, what are you talking about? Takeshi, you mean Takeshi? Takeshi's the one in the pendant? No. The Takeshi we know isn't the real Kuronari Takeshi. I think he's lying to us. Huh? The real Takeshi, the real Kuronari Takeshi, is your and my father. Tsugumi closed her eyes. She breathed out a long sigh. I could see the tension leave Tsugumi's body. Hey, what's this all about, Oni-chan? Explain what's happening. All right, but before I do, I want to check something. I hesitated about what to say next. I looked above my head. The sky was full of stars, and the single whale twisted floating through space. Whale, where do you go all by yourself? Will you meet someone special someday? Snap. I extinguished the lighter. I gripped the pendant and the lighter in my hand. Tsugumi's outline was hazy in the dark. She was our long sought after Mom. When I called out to her, warm tears ran down my cheeks. You're our mother, aren't you? Our mother. Mom. You are, aren't you? What? Tsugumi slowly opened her eyes. She looked at Sarah and me. I could see the tears in her eyes. Mom, please say something. I'm sorry. I don't blame you for anything. I've waited for you for so long. I've been waiting for you. Answer, Mom! I screamed at her. Sarah clung to my arm, shaking her head and buried her face into my chest. Her thin body was shaking. Don't just stand there, say something! Holding Sarah tightly, I stepped forward. No, I'm not your mother. Don't you lie to me! I know everything! 17 years ago there was another accident just like this one here at Leimu, and you and Takeshi became a couple. Tsugumi was shedding huge tears. She tried to stop them. Her breath was ragged and came out in hiccups. Her face twisted as she struggled to keep control of her emotions. Tears welled in her eyes and rolled down her cheeks. Yes, that's right. You're right. I gave birth to you, but I have no right to be called mother. You have a real mother, don't you? Someone who took care of you? I wasn't able to protect you both. I couldn't take care of you. I pretty much abandoned you. And I left you and walked away. I'm terrible and I don't expect you to be able to forgive me. That's why I'm not your mother. Please don't call me mother. Please don't. Tsugumi put her head in her hands and sobbed. And at that moment, Sarah says, Mama, Mama, Mama! Oh, now we're all hugging in a special illustration where Tsugumi is fucking huge, I guess. Sarah tore herself away from me and flew into Tsugumi's arms. Wow.
Following her lead, I clung to Tsugumi and cried as well. The first thing I noticed was her familiar smell. I breathed in her scent deeply. Covered in tears, wallowing in the warmth, I felt as though I had regained everything I had ever lost. The three of us held each other tightly, relishing the touch of one another, entwined, and our hearts became one. There was no longer our individual selves, but one collective entity. There were no boundaries between us. The whole being was filled with warmth. Beside me, Sarah's cheeks were wet with tears, and Tsugumi was soft and her skin was sweet and sticky. Ew. I recalled the long-forgotten memories of my mother's smell. It wasn't exactly the same feeling as nostalgia. It was primitive, something instinctive, a sweetness that had been wired directly into my brain. Mama! Mom! As if in response, Tsugumi pulled us closer, gripping us with a fierce determination. She buried her face in Sarah's and my hair, drew us close and stroked us the back of our heads. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Tsugumi's voice was choked up. I can't ask you to forgive me. I never once forgot about you. All this time, I've wanted to see you, to find you and apologize. It's all right. Mama, you don't need to apologize. It's enough to just be here with you. As we held on to each other, we understood everything. Sarah and I accepted everything, understood, and forgave. Reasons weren't important. At that moment, a quiet peace filled us. It was enough. We didn't require anything else. I relaxed and leaned against my mother. She was warm. I closed my eyes and was intoxicated by her warmth. Mom. A cozy slumber. A soft breeze under the May sunshine. Peace. It was like floating on the calm ocean, swaying comfortably, cuddled up together, and before I knew it, I had stopped crying. All I could hear was just our calm breathing and my mother's heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. I was alive. Or maybe I had just been born. Thump, 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 thump. Everything was affirmed, accepted, and forgiven. There was no me, nor Sarah, nor Tsugumi. There was only one life connected together. Just one single soul. In the year 2017, May 7th at 11 a.m. I'm going to take a sip. The men from Lablik were waiting for Tsugumi when she got to the floating island. Tsugumi, a carrier of the Cure virus. To them, she was a valuable sample. Their eyes glaring and mouths half opened, she could see their dark, wet tongues. It was almost possible for Tsugumi to smell the reek of their excitement, like the smell of men lusting after flesh. It was a fetid stench, greasy and rotten. For it was Tsugumi's body that they were after. What they wanted was nothing more than to perform human experiments under the pretext of making the ultimate human dream come true. By using Tsugumi's body, they were planning to gain knowledge, fame, and fortune. That was indeed their desire. We've been waiting for you, one of them took a deep bow. Behind his veneer of politeness was an evil that threatened to spill forth, making Tsugumi sick to her stomach. Some of the others in his entourage licked their lips, swallowing their saliva like dogs gone mad with the hunt. That instant, Tsugumi kicked hard off into the ground, breaking into a run. She ran across the wide surface of the huge artificial island, desperately scaling the high surrounding fence, and fled into the nearby foliage. Their cacophony of screams and angry cursing faded behind her. Tsugumi hid and waited until nightfall. She had a single hamster to her chest. At night, a supply-carrying vessel slipped out of the floating island's port. Tsugumi had stowed away on the vessel, hiding herself among the cargo, and she was headed towards the mainland. And from that moment, Tsugumi's life was consumed with one thought: how to escape from them. Although she wasn't a criminal, she avoided people, preferring to hide in the darkness, all the while threatened by ominous feelings of being hunted. Nothing changed after she safely made it to land. Every few weeks she moved
from one town to another, wandering in the darkness. She slept under bridges, under backstreet eaves, pipes pouring out into the ocean, and even in public restrooms. It was an endless cycle of running, and she never had a second's peace. She couldn't turn to the police. She had no place to live, her identity uncertain, and her age and appearance didn't match. The police would only doubt her. Information regarding Tsugumi had spread through the national police networks. It was only a matter of time before Leiblich could find her. Leiblich's influence had extended to national politics. There was nothing else for Tsugumi to do but to continue to hide in back alleys. She hated Leiblich. They had destroyed everything Tsugumi had cared about and made her life a living hell. What was more, they had even taken away the love of her life, Kuronari Takeshi. She wanted to get revenge on Leiblich with every fiber of her being. Tsugumi came to hate the world, and her heart became even more hardened to it. 2 months had passed. It was summertime. All of a sudden, she began feeling sick. She didn't know she had stopped menstruating, but she didn't want to think about the possibility. She went to visit an illegal doctor who was well known in the back streets. Tsugumi was pregnant. She was sure it was Takeshi's baby. She'd never been with anyone else. She was pregnant. At night, she went to the deserted coastal area of a small nearby town. There was nothing but printing factories and abandoned houses. And unsure if a river or an ocean, she sat on a boat dock, looking at the neon sign on the highway. She touched her stomach. She felt a sense of awe and joy at the fact that there was life growing in her belly and that it was connected to her. The neon light glittered and flickered off the water's surface. Tsugumi looked at the lights with her hands on her stomach, and realizing that Takeshi's babies were inside of her, she couldn't stop crying. They might have been only a centimeter big at that time. Okay. But the survival of the 2 babies outstripped the needs of the mother's body that surrounded them. Tsugumi almost had the illusion that it wasn't her that bore the children, but it was actually they who bore her. Everything that she was, she poured into her 2 babies. She felt that she was part of the babies, not the other way around. It was then that Tsugumi decided to sacrifice everything for the 2 tiny lives. Love was a concept to her, but if love could be brought into physical form, to her, it seemed it must be the babies in her. I guess. Whatever makes you sleep, Tsugumi. That was it. Love was growing inside of her. Takeshi and Tsugumi's babies. Before long, the hatred she had felt towards everything had disappeared without a trace, and for the first time, Tsugumi felt as though there was a higher power guiding her life. 7 months later, January 21st, 2018, Tsugumi was suddenly struck with contractions. When they came, the back alley doctor had gone somewhere. She visited a nearby clinic. She had no medical insurance, no identification. Most importantly, she had no money. When she found out that she couldn't pay, the doctor beat Tsugumi as though she were a stray animal. With nowhere else to go, the 2 babies were born in an old boat shack. An old woman living there, but Tsugumi couldn't tell whether she lived there or was just a vagrant. It was an old woman who helped Tsugumi through the birth.
"Oh, how precious, so precious. You've done a fine job, dearie."
The old lady repeated that many times as she gently rinsed the babies in a tin basin. The sweat-covered Tsugumi was lying down with only a thin towel between her and a hardwood floor. Tsugumi's eyes gazed, unfocused, out a nearby window. Oh, it's snowing. Snow was falling outside.
"How darling, yes, a precious boy and girl. Which one'll you hold first?"
The illegal doctor had told her, so she was expecting twins, but she never imagined that they would be fraternal. A bit surprised, she said, "Both of them, at the same time." Wrapped in an old cloth, Tsugumi gently held them to her chest.
"Not to worry, my dearie. I boiled the cloth and the scissors that cut the cord in hot water good. I did."
"Thank you." Tsugumi thanked her. Clearly. Thank you very much. She gave thanks to the 2 lives that had been born safely. "Thank you."
And those last words were directed towards the deep darkness beyond the window. The snow was falling. The two babies pressed to Tsugumi's chest with their eyes closed, let out small yawns. The Curie virus. Soon after she had given birth, Tsugumi's thoughts were turned to the possibility. If they got infected by Curie while they were inside of me, and if their DNA was altered just like me... Tsugumi visited the illegal doctor. Don't worry about it, he explained, laughing. According to taxonomic classification, a pure human being would belong to the primates, Anthropoidae, Hominidae, Homo sapiens. I did that excellently. Tsugumi, whose genetic information was altered by the Curie virus, was not pure human anymore, but rather a subspecies of it. Let's just call you a subspecies Curie for now. Now, any kids who were born from Takeshi, the Homo sapiens, and Tsugumi, the Curie, would technically be hybrids. Now, by the way, I guess I should tell you that the Curie virus only infects pure humans, the Homo sapiens. So there is no way that the Curie virus could possibly affect your two little hybrids in there. So while not much is known about the Curie virus, some of the unique functions scientists have discovered, such as regenerating telomeres and regenerative healing, are inherited recessively. For blood types, without exception, all children are born type AA father and type OO mother, for instance, can only be type AO, with the type A predisposition. Why? Because type A factors are inherited dominantly, and type O factors are inherited recessively. In order for a child's blood to be type O, you'd have to have a mixture of either AO, AO and AO, AO and BO, AO and OO, BO and BO, BO and OO, and OO or OO. Thank you. Okay. It can only be one of the above, meaning both parents have got to have that type O factor for the genetic milkshake. Same goes for the Curie virus. Any child born from pure blood sapiens and Curie will, and all B sapiens Curie will inherit dominant physical traits from both. For the Rugrats to become full-blooded Curie, the parents would have to be Curie and Curie, Sapiens Curie and Curie, or Sapiens Curie and Sapiens Curie. Any of those combinations, meaning that both parents have to be part or all Curie. And since those two little critters were born from pure Sapiens and pure Curie, they'll have the same physical traits as a pure human and won't possess the Curie traits like a perpetual youth. So you don't have anything to worry about, alright? The doctor held up the two babies Tsugumi had brought and laughed again. Whew, wow. Okay. Tsugumi didn't know his background. It's like at this point she starts to question the background of this illegal doctor. I was like, listen you, what are your credentials? Anyway, thanks for telling me that my babies don't have Curie. It was probable that he had been part of Lablick's laboratory staff in the past since he knew so much about Curie, but he didn't seem to be one of them. Tsugumi figured she could trust him. Among outcasts, there was an unspoken law. You don't go nosing around in other people's pasts. Tsugumi didn't want to know anything more, and he didn't demand to know anything about her either. A year after giving birth, it was winter again. Tsugumi had rented a tiny room and lived together with the two babies. Of course, Chami was there as well. It was quiet, rustic coastal town. It wasn't a city or a tourist town, no fishing or farming, nothing. Just a dreary port town. During the day, Tsugumi worked for next to nothing at a sewing factory while the babies stayed at a daycare center. She spent every day glued to the sewing machine from early morning till 4 p.m. and after that she would spend time with the babies. Her wages were low, so of course they were poor. They couldn't even afford disposable diapers. Tsugumi collected small scraps of cloth leftovers from the factory and sewed diapers and clothes for the babies. Despite the harsh living condition, the babies were growing healthily. Their life was a peaceful one, and although they were poor, the poverty didn't threaten them. They were content. The three of them were always smiling.
Mama, Mama, oh, Chami, Chami. They were already beginning to talk. The boy had started walking a few steps at a time, and the girl was able to stand, barely, as she held on to things. The girl had begun to speak, oh, Chami, Chami, which was very unusual for a 1-year-old. The boy, it seemed, grew faster physically, and the girl faster intellectually. Tsugumi tenderly watched over the cute gestures, and she was filled with happiness. May 7th, 2019. The two babies were 15 months old. Tsugumi had taken them to the beach. The boy ran around the sand, falling and getting back up over and over. The girl was sitting in the water, putting her hands in the waves. She was giggling, saying, "Cold, so cold." Watching out over the flat surface of the ocean, Tsugumi's thoughts turned to Takeshi. "So live, as long as you're alive, live. Don't worry, I'm not going to die." Those were Takeshi's last words to her. It had been 2 years already. "I'm not going to die." And after saying that, he sank to the bottom of the ocean, protecting the woman he loved and protecting the children right in front of her. "You fool, you're a liar," Tsugumi whispered to the ocean. But at the same time, she still hadn't given up hope. No, he must be alive somewhere. He's a man of his word. And just then, a wave swallowed the girl who had been playing near the edge of the water. It was a small sun-soaked wave from an adult's perspective, but to a 1-year-old child it was a raging wall of water. The girl disappeared in a splash, and the water was sucked out into the ocean like a piece of driftwood by the tide. Tsugumi ran hard as she could, held back by the resistance of the sand, but before she could get there, something unbelievable happened. The boy, who was only 1 year and 3 months old, jumped into the water and saved the girl. Hardly able to believe what she had seen, Tsugumi rushed towards them. She carried them to dry sand. The girl started crying. The boy, seemingly unaware of what had happened, looked at his crying sister. And a few seconds later he fell over as if all of his strength had left him. That night, both of them came down with a high fever. It was summertime. 1.5 years had passed since the birth, and all of that time, the previous 1.5 years, had been filled with happiness. So I think that story about, I think that was mentioned before, that Sarah was like, "You're going to teach me how to swim because you saved me one time," and she remembers that specifically. And I'm trying to think of like, do I remember anything of being 1.5 years old? I don't know that I do. Anyway. Summertime, 1.5 years had passed since birth, and all of the time the previous 1.5 years had been filled with happiness. Nothing special had happened, and that's why it had been so peaceful. Aw, look at the babies. They're so tiny. Giant Tsugumi. Anyway. Where did the blonde genetics come from? If Tsugumi has black hair and Takeshi has red? Is his hair red? Yes, that makes blonde. The boy was a wild one, and Tsugumi could hardly take her eyes off of him for a second. He was constantly putting everything, even Chami, into his mouth. Yes, that is real. Any electrical appliance that he touched seemed to break, and he wouldn't stop jamming metal wires into outlets. Jeez, he should have been dead. Jeez. The girl wasn't quite as much of a challenge since she had moved about less, but still, Tsugumi had to put up with her stubbornness. She refused to eat things that she didn't like, and she got into a bad mood. She wouldn't stop fussing. And no matter how much Tsugumi warned her, she wouldn't stop playing with her brother's hair. She would always demand, "More Chami! More Chami!" And those days are filled with Tsugumi being buffeted by her own two rambunctious children. 1 second. But no matter how challenging they were, even those days were filled with happiness. At night, all 3 of them slept together, cuddled up on a thin mattress. "Mama, Mama, ah, Chami, Chami." Do you think these kids have developed to think that Chami is like part of the family? This weird hamster is just like, my life is so long. Talking in their sleep, the 2 babies sought their mother's touch. Looking down at their sweet, innocent gestures, Tsugumi felt bliss that she had never known. One day, her peaceful world was shattered into pieces. It all happened so unexpectedly. Caught up in her life of happiness, Tsugumi had forgotten to watch out for them. She didn't know how they had found out, but they had somehow gathered information and showed up without warning. Them, the people from Leiblich. With no time to collect anything, all Tsugumi could bring with her was her 2 babies and her hamster, and she fled. So they ran, but it was obvious to Tsugumi that eventually Leiblich would hunt them down. And as they continued running, Tsugumi thought to herself, even if I could keep escaping, would it really be happiness for the 2 children? They wouldn't be able to go to school. It would be too hard on them to keep moving from town to town. Besides, if we ever get caught, what would they do to the children at Leiblich? It's too dangerous for them to be with me. Tsugumi made up her mind. She researched an orphanage that she could trust and decided to leave them there. The two children were just too young, and even if Tsugumi had tried to explain, they couldn't have understood. And with no other option, she left the pendant she had kept with her, making the wish that she had gave it. I will come back for you. I will come back and get you, I promise. Being too young to understand the situation, the 2 children just stared at their mother crying. Weeping bitter tears, Tsugumi looked back many times as she walked away. All she had left was Chami, and from Tsugumi's chest pocket, Chami looked up at her face in puzzlement. Even Chami's cute gestures could do little to ease Tsugumi's broken heart. She spent many nights in the depths of despair, crying in her sorrow. A few years later, by the time Tsugumi went to the orphanage, the children were already gone, and from that time on she had gone through life no more than an empty husk. And until that day, until that very moment, Tsugumi had been searching for her children, wandering through darkness. Tsugumi finished telling her story and closed her eyes gently. She never once mentioned the names Hokuto or Sarah in the story, because those names weren't the names Tsugumi had given them. Someone else had named them Hokuto and Sarah. Alright, so now it's 2:54 p.m. I left Tsugumi and Sarah. If I could, I wanted to stay with them forever, but that wasn't possible. There's still many unsolved matters that I needed to take care of. Listening to Tsugumi's story had caused me to suddenly remember something. I had received a phone call before coming to Leimu. Over the phone, the voice had said to me, "If you come to Leimu, you can see your mother and sister." Oh, so that was it. Before the accident took place, I had been waiting for someone at the rest area. That must have been my mother and Sarah. Tsugumi must have been roped into coming to Leimu in the same way that I was. Wait, roped in? What for? I still didn't know the answer to that. But I had some clues. The voice on the phone had been male, and without a doubt, I knew whose voice it had been. I ran to him. Dun dun dun. Who is this man? Who is he? Anyway, you aren't Kurenari Takeshi. Barging into the rest area, I demanded an answer from the man in front of me. I couldn't call him Takeshi anymore. That guy had been deceiving us the whole time. Look, I don't have any clue what you're talking about. Don't play dumb. I know the real Takeshi is Sarah and Mai's father. I don't know why you say it like that. It's their father. Father? Me? You and Sarah's? No, not you. Sarah and I are children of Takeshi and Tsugumi. Wait, so Tsugumi and I keep telling you that you're not Takeshi. I'm talking about the Takeshi from the other world. Other world? What the heck is that supposed to mean? The world back in 2017. Huh? 2017, huh? And when were you born? On January 21st, 16 years ago. In what year? 2018. I see. So how could you possibly know what happened in 2017? I don't know, I just do. What do you expect me to do about it? Besides, we're not talking about me now. Who are you anyway? And why did you lie about the year 2017? Why are you pretending to be Kurenari Takeshi? What's the reason you tried to trick us by repeating the same incident 17 years ago by using the same words? To trick you, huh? Think twice, will you, kid? For instance, if I was repeating the incident in 2017, How could I possibly trick you, someone who was born in 2018? Practically speaking, it's impossible to trick you into believing the same incident from 17 years ago is taking place. Do you get it? Besides, how could you tell it was the same incident? How could you tell that I'm using the same phrase? How could you even know the history before you were even born? Why don't you reveal your true self? Who are you, anyway? And for some reason, I couldn't say a word. Who am I, anyway? The same question was repeated in my mind. Oh, I see. When it comes to your story, you clam up, huh? Alright then. I'll tell you my real name. Yes, as you said, I'm not Kurenari Takeshi. My real name is Kaburaki. Kaburaki Ryogo. Zip. We are now back in Takeshi's timeline. It's 3:19 p.m. And now we have the kid from this timeline saying his name is Kaburaki Ryogo. I just remembered my name. The kid repeated it slowly. Kaburaki Ryogo. Kaburaki Ryogo. I see. Way to go. I smiled and patted his head. The young Kaburaki smiled shyly. Without a word, the young Kaburaki went behind the statue and started scratching. He had a screwdriver in his hands. Kaburaki Ryogo. With thin, sharp writing, the young Kaburaki carved his name deeply into the statue. He must have been pretty happy to have remembered his name. Or was it that he wouldn't forget it again? Although I didn't know the reason, he carved his name into the statue, and he continued on. Without stopping his hands, he also carved some more names. Yagami Koko, Tanaka Yubise Harukana, Komachi Tsugumi, Akanagasaki Sora, and Kurenari Takeshi, Pipi, and Chami. The young Kaburaki carved the names of everyone who had been confined there. He smiled happily after finishing up, and the statue kept silent with his hands on its chest. We zip back over to Hokuto. It's 4:22 p.m. That boy's name was also Kaburaki Ryogo, which meant that the kid from 17 years ago and the guy pretending to be Takeshi were actually the same person? He looked so young, it was hard to believe it had been 17 years. If the young Kaburaki was 15 years old, that would make him 32 years old in my world. But Kaburaki I spoke to was around 20. There was no way that he would have been over 30 years old. Which meant, before I realized it, the man who had called himself Kaburaki had disappeared. He had left a while before. I'd been standing there lost in thought for some time. I recalled the scene in 2017, which I had just witnessed earlier. I went around to the statues as if being called over to it. On the back of the statue was childish stick figures. 6 human-like figures and 2 unfamiliar animal shapes were drawn there. What? I looked at the statue. The statue pointed south. I looked back at the other statues as well. Surprisingly, there was a similar drawing on the statue pointing to the sky. And there were also 6 people's names as well, Pipi and Chami, carved into the statue, which stood on with its hand on its chest. There was no writing on the statue pointing east. Oh God, what is this supposed to mean? What's up with this world anyway? Puzzled and confused, my head felt like it was about to explode. I didn't know things that I was supposed to know. I knew the things that I wasn't supposed to. That must be why my head is so confused. I still haven't recalled any of my memories. Some parts of it had come back, but nothing really important. To begin with, I still didn't know what kind of person Hokuto was, and at the same time, I knew I wasn't supposed to know and I could see what I wasn't supposed to see. For instance, the world 17 years ago into the past, about the legend of Pygmalion, the Tiefblau virus, the Curie virus, Pipi and Chami. I knew about all of them. I knew exactly what had happened during the dramatic escape 17 years ago and what had happened May 6th and 7th, the world in 2034. And I could sense even the different story flows, the different history flows in my world. I knew about escaping using the principle of siphon and using swimming to the ocean surface from 34 meters underwater. The third eye, Blickwinkle, those words were clear in my head. And then I remembered running into Dr. Tanaka on the floating island. No, rather than remembering, it was better to say I could see it. Anyway, I saw her. The woman was called Dr. Tanaka Yubisei Akikana's mother, meaning she was actually Yubisei Harukana. Although their relationship defied the norm, Yubisei Harukana and Yubisei Akikana were still mother and daughter. Pieces of my thoughts scattered. I tried gathering them and struggled to come up with some kind of conclusion. It's 2034 now, and Koko was in 2017. I whispered to confirm the facts. Yes, that's right. It was 2034. That's why Tsugumi had been so suspicious of us. Because the same thing that had happened 17 years ago was repeating. How about the others? Since Yubisei Akikana was born 17 years prior, she couldn't possibly have known about the incident. And since Sarah hadn't been born yet, she wouldn't know either. Sora, being AI, couldn't lie, and she didn't seem to be lying either. So that only left Kaburaki. Did that mean Kaburaki was the mastermind behind the whole incident of 2034? No, wait. There had been two others who had survived the incident 17 years ago. Yubisei Harukana and Koko. On May 6, 2017, Kaburaki, Yubisei Harukana, and Koko, who had been infected with the Tiefblau virus, had been rescued in the mini-sub that came to the pool in the IBF. Hey, that reminds me. How did the three of them recover the virus after they'd been infected? Because the injection of the antibodies is made from Tsugumi's blood. But Koko hadn't received the antibodies because she had been under a high-pressure oxygen treatment in the capsule pod at the time. No, even before that. Yubisei Harukana suffered from the critical heart disease, right? But she's still alive and well. What is going on here? There was only one answer. It was the only explanation. Yubisei Harukana and Kaburaki must have been infected by the Kirei virus. Their bodies must have repeated 5 years worth of cell division when all of their DNA had been rewritten and they stopped aging. That must be why they looked younger than their real age. And Yubisei Harukana's heart disease would have been fixed by the Kirei virus. But still, is that really what happened? In a different history flow, Kaburaki couldn't see the image of the pendant, and if he was lying or acting, he must not have possessed infrared vision. And although I didn't have any proof, my instincts told me that Yubisei Harukana didn't possess infrared vision either. Then again, in the world of 2017, Tsugumi had mentioned that she was special amongst the carriers of the Kirei virus. Perhaps she was a rare example of DNA replacement that had taken place safely over the whole body. That meant Yubisei Harukana and Kaburaki weren't complete Kirei? But it didn't seem that there could be any such thing as an incomplete Kirei. It's no use. I can't figure it out. But I still had a far more serious and pressing matter to deal with. I needed to think about that problem first. The problem was, how was I able to sense incidents that had taken place before I was born or in a separate time continua? And why is the same accident as 17 years earlier taking place again? It couldn't have been a coincidence. Obviously, somebody had planned it. There was only one clue. Koko. I wanted to see Koko. I love that film too. I felt that Koko would know everything there was to know about the incident. But how could I find Koko, who seemed to just pop up randomly? Oh, I know. I had a sudden inspiration. I had a hunch. At that hour on the 5th, Koko would show up in the Cosmic Whale Room. Woo! We zipped over to Takeshi's timeline. Woohoo! Okay, so things are heating up. And I'm gonna stop it here because it's been an hour. But thank you for joining, and boy, I wonder what the hell's going on, don't you? This is crazy. Good to know about that history.
Anyway, thanks for joining and have a happy time today doing something else.